Spectre Woods is barely a video game, but it did cost money, and it has an ending, so I included it. This, along with everything else this guy made, are currently some of the cheapest games in the PlayStation Store, and I got them for even cheaper by buying them all together. A few years ago, I impulse bought a bunch of garbage off the Wii U eShop before it closed, and it awakened a fascination I had with obscure and cursed indie games. And randomly last year, it dawned on me. All those teenage boys pretending to be game developers probably migrated to the Switch. Then I noticed that the Switch's eShop is one of the slowest, most painful search engines I've ever suffered through, so I took my business elsewhere. I forgot how doable buying a digital game was. But it's definitely not going to replace my physical gamer hoard. My digital purchases will be 50-cent pieces of fascinating garbage that couldn't possibly be sold on a disc only! Spectre Woods isn't the first one I bought, nor is it the ideal one to talk about first, but it's a ranking video and this one is the worst, so here we go. It's a pseudo-artsy, pixel-filtered, color-distorted, square aspect ratioed third-person shooter where you play as a woman who's about to get married before everyone disappeared and a gun spawned in their place. Or at least I think that's what's going on. There's no sound in the entire game except for gunshots and grunts. I don't usually do this, but just so you get the gist of how atrocious it is, I'm gonna keep the audio on while I talk about it. The first level is under a minute, and it's only here to introduce you to the concept of following the sprouting flowers that show you the way to the exit. Level 2 introduces sinister forces that slowly levitate towards you. Shoot them before they make your health bar lower! And it even ends with a climactic boss fight that must be shot more times. But not too rapidly, because you have an ammo meter that only slowly recharges, and if you shoot too fast, then you might have to wait a couple seconds before you can shoot rapidly again. Level 3 is the cinematic finale. You walk forward a few steps, only to find your grave? Then the ending cutscene plays, showing you back at the wedding ceremony, but dead. Oh my god, was I dead this whole time? Nothing else happens. It just stays a black screen for all eternity. It doesn't even go back to the title screen. The Little Tales of Alexandria is a modern game made with the baby's first coding program called GB Studio. It's even less of a game than Spectre Woods because there's no way to lose. But there is one part that has a dead end that you have to find your way around. That's an obstacle. That's gameplay. I played it on an Evercade compilation, but for some reason he thought he should also sell it as a standalone physical release for Game Boy, so it counts. Evercade carts usually have pretty low standards for games, but this is next level. How did this make the cut? The goal of the game is to get to the social feast being held on the roof of the apartment building. You can enter rooms, talk to people, and look at various objects, but there's no reason to. There's not even a story. The characters just say their own things that are completely unrelated to each other. If you don't interact with anything, the entire game can be beaten in 2 minutes. According to the developer's Twitter, this is the updated version. What was it like before? Daylight Dread is another downloadable shooter on the PlayStation Store. I'm impressed at how good you can make a game look nowadays with stolen assets. It's so detailed that even the PS5 version runs like garbage. In this game, you walk around what looks to be some kind of castle, picking up ammo and shooting fat zombies. Well, the ones you can find anyway. They seem to spawn very slowly. You also can't die. No matter how many times they swipe at you, nothing happens. Blood does get on the screen, so maybe your character has an unlimited supply, or maybe it's the blood that's already on the zombie's hands. The game keeps track of your body count at the bottom of the screen, but there's no high score leaderboard, so I don't see the point of that. But it does remember how many you killed via achievements. To a certain extent. You get the first achievement when you've killed one zombie. The next achievement is when you've killed one more zombie. And the achievement after that is when you've killed one more zombie. You keep receiving trophies after every kill until zombie kill number 11, where you become the body count master. If the game itself is telling me that I've killed enough zombies and to enjoy my rest, I think that qualifies as beating it. But no, the zombies don't stop spawning. There is no real ending. But this game has one thing going for it. It is the single easiest to go out of bounds in. In fact, there's a doorway. It invites you. I'm guessing that he forgot to add an invisible wall that prevents you from leaving because no enemies spawn out here. And you can walk off the edge. There's that too. Lady in a Leotard with a Gun was also in the Voices game's Mega Bundle. This was the very first one I played. It's better than Spectre Woods because at the very least the amount of minutes it takes to complete it is in the double digits. But only barely. It also has jumping, rolling, actual music, and it even has a level that changes the camera perspective for some saucy variety. But the final level's design is so god-awful that it almost ruins the game! You spawn in what looks to be a fairly wide open area, but your eyes deceive you. This is the largest level in the history of video games. It only looks smaller because the game has a messed up field of view that makes you feel like you're moving 1 mile a day. It takes over 10 minutes of rolling to get from one end of the map to the other, but there's no exit on the other side of the chasm. 99% of this level is empty space. The exit door is near the beginning. Can you see it? There it is! You win! For now. Bounce Journey is a 2D platformer where you play as a ball through 31 very short, very easy levels. But despite the obnoxious baby graphics and sound effects, they at the very least make it so you have to go back when you die. If you die. In this journey, you can jump on enemies, solve very simple block-pushing puzzles, and collect coins. The coins can be spent on different colors for your ball character, and the colors don't do anything at all. This one doesn't have an ending either. When you beat the final level, you simply just don't unlock another one. Little Paws Kitty Cat Simulator is a 3D platformer on the Nintendo eShop. Yes, I eventually sucked it up and waited 20 seconds every time I clicked anything. In this simulator, you find and eat as many of the floating fish that spawn around the level as you can before the timer runs out. The first area is by far the hardest, where you have to use a cabinet's handles as a platform. Once you get used to it, it's not that hard, but how are you supposed to figure that out? There's only 3 areas, but they pad the runtime by having 5 levels per, but that's not all. There's also 2 different modes, both with the exact same description. So I'll do the game's job and explain the difference. Time Race gives you a set amount of fish to collect, and how many seconds you have left in the timer dictates how many stars you get. While Loot Run's timer always runs out, and the score is dictated by how many fish you get before it does. Both modes require at least 1 star to unlock the next level. And like Bounce Journey, when you beat the last one... What? Did you expect something? Why are you still here? Do you want to replay an earlier level? Daemon Fall is an infinite arcade-style first-person shooter where you must shoot wave after wave of zombies before reaching the big baddie that very slowly walks towards you and does nothing else. Rinse, repeat. Even though the first boss is at wave 6, all the subsequent bosses are 5 waves after each other. The game design is inconsistent and weird like that. For example, buying the first weapon upgrade with the coins you get killing enemies only to be gifted the next one by beating the second boss. The graphics are also inconsistent, as you could probably tell. I can only assume that the enemy sprites are drawn by the creator, but at least 2 out of the 3 guns are stolen from Doom. I don't recognize this one, but it looks like it's from Doom. Maybe it's from a fan game. Even the exploits are inconsistent. You can walk past any zombie without taking damage as long as you keep moving, but not if you rapidly wiggle around. You're only invincible when you move in somewhat straight lines, idiot! But not in the bosses, that don't work. Since this is yet another game that has no ending, I got all the trophies since that's all there is to technically do. I mean, I could get the world record on the leaderboard, which is very doable since this game doesn't get any harder after you reach wave 12, but that would take all day. I'm not even going to try. Who is this Evan? He has even less of a life than me. Aluna is another game on the Voices Games Mega Bundle. I asked the developer how to pronounce it on Twitter. Hopefully he responds. I need to know. You play as this sexy thing, seen here applying support to make sure its booty doesn't catch on fire. When am I going to get to play as the freaky woman on the logo? Is that its mascot? In an intense twist of events, this one is not just a third-person shooter, or even a third-person shooter that has a single 2-dimensional level, but a run-and-gun platformer that turns into a top-down twin-stick shooter, then turns back into a run-and-gun, then goes top-down again, and then finally turns into a third-person shooter for its final level. I like how the game looks. It reminds me of those mid-90s computer animation tests, the ones that would always take place in space for some reason, probably because the environment would have a lot less going on that way. But that's totally unrelated to why this guy did it, I'm sure. Either way, I like it. Very shiny. That, along with the gameplay twist of gravitational pulls being at least something, should make this higher on the list, right? Well, like everything else so far, it's only 10 minutes. This developer reminds me a lot of me back when I programmed games on Scratch. I was too giddy and impatient to properly flesh anything out because I wanted to experiment with my next idea now! My games were usually like 2 minutes, but I was prepubescent. What's his excuse? At last, we finally made it to a real video game! And it's all thanks to Limited Run. But there are plenty of 50-cent games still yet to come, so that should show you how bad it is. Ground Zero Texas Nuclear Edition is a 90s full-motion video shooter remastered for the PlayStation 4, and remastered very lazily. While the video technically looks better as it's no longer compressed by the Sega CD's limited hardware, it no longer fits with the UI. Most of the original footage has been found, but they didn't even bother upscaling it to fit with the graphics on the foreground. The video was shot with a 240p camera, and all they did to disguise that was make it blurry. I would have been fine with a lower resolution game as long as it was sharp. I've never played the original version, but I assume it didn't give you unlimited continues, as those FMV games were always unforgiving. Beating this was pretty easy, and pretty boring. All you do is swap between cameras and shoot the aliens that are trying to break it. Sometimes a character reads out a code to you that you need later on, which I remember a lot from other FMV games. They like doing that for some reason. Those games would have made you start all over if you didn't magically know what camera to get the codes from, but I don't remember having trouble with that here. Maybe this version doesn't force that on you, I don't know. Oh, I guess you only need 3 and have 30 seconds to guess the other one. Thanks, footage. I didn't write over half of these reviews until long after I beat the game, so I don't remember a lot. The only enjoyment I got from this was laughing at how badly it was put together. It was probably harder to tell when these wide shot sections cut to a different clip back when everything was harder to see, but it's painfully obvious now. Once again, they probably could have done something to make it look better. Don't bother, it's not the best digital pictures game to receive the modern treatment. It's not even the funniest. Hi Cars is an eShop game where you play as a red car that must reach the end of the various obstacle courses that are thousands of feet in the air. So it's pretty much the custom Grand Theft Auto tracks you see in commentary drama videos. There's no title screen, no pausing, no music, and no opponents. The only obstacle is falling off. If you do, then you spawn back at the beginning of the level. There's only 20, but if you power through the unfinished collision detection and wonky physics, then you're rewarded with what the game refers to as level 21, which is just level 1 again. The game loops and pretends it has limited levels. When you reach level 11, your car turns blue for some reason, and when you reach level 21, it turns back to red. Level 31, blue again. It keeps cycling through them until it forgets to. I don't remember when or which color it was, but it stays the same for 2 cycles and then goes back to normal after. Don't ask me how I know this, let's just say I'm certain that the game loops forever. Dragons in Space is another game from the Voices Games Mega Bundle, and this one is a horizontal shooter. You have 3 weapons, a boomerang, this circular gliding sword thing, and a traditional blaster that shoots non-traditional bouncy bullets. They can hurt you if they come back, so watch out! Instead of being able to choose which one you want at any given time, the game starts you with the boomerang and switches to the next one every time you reach a new level. And before you ask, of course the amount of levels is an even number. 8 levels, so you get to use the boomerang and the sword 3 times, but only get the bouncy bullets twice. You really couldn't have tacked on a 9th level. Or better yet, get rid of 2, because you really start to feel those single-minute levels when you die and have to try again. This game moves so slow, the longest minutes you'll ever experience. It awards you stars at the end of the levels based on if you didn't take damage, killed all the enemies, or rescued all the escape pods. You can revisit any level at any time to truly test your patience, I mean skill. It's only for achievements, so no, I'm not doing that. Monster Trucks is a Game Boy Advance rally racer where you control a vehicle with very large wheels. There are 10 tracks in total, and half of them even have their own individual backgrounds. In between tracks, you can purchase upgrades or nitros with the money you earned. But once you upgrade your speed, which you can do before the start of the very first race, the other racers don't stand a chance. This game controls terribly, and yet no matter how many times your car flips over, your opponents are still very far behind. I can only assume they can't control it either. I never lost a single race. I never even got in second! Once you finish all 10 races, it then starts a new season, which is essentially just a new game plus. You race on the same 10 tracks with increased difficulty on the enemies, but you keep all your upgrades, so they're still pretty easy. I beat the 10 tracks again for some godforsaken reason, and then the same thing happened. Track 1, upgraded car, harder enemies. But by this point, you've most likely upgraded everything, so if you were to suffer through the same hideous tracks again and again, the other racers might actually become difficult. And then eventually impossible. So despite this being the career mode, it functions as an early 80s arcade game. Except the graphics aren't quite as good. Gonducky Industries Plus Plus is yet even another game from the Voices Games Mega Bundle. And it's probably the closest this guy's been to making a really real, not fake game. It's by far his longest, it has boss fights, and the music is actually pretty good. I wonder how he managed to make the game so long. Oh wait, this footage is sped up 4 times. There you go. This one is a shooter that's not on rails, but has very narrow levels that are a lot like that of a rail shooter. Where a game like Star Fox has the analog stick move your ship's targeting reticle while the camera remains pointing in the same direction, this one always shoots directly in the middle. The left stick controls what direction your ship and the camera is turning, while the right stick moves you 2-dimensionally with a sort of flying sidestep. Learning how to use both sticks simultaneously takes a lot of getting used to, and it becomes almost impossible to dodge the projectiles. I died so many times at level 6 that I ended up just flailing in random patterns hoping for the best. I like how dreamlike the atmosphere can be, and I can definitely tell he tried this time, but the speed of your ship is just agonizing. I only endured it because I kept thinking it would be over. Lizard Lady vs. the Cats is from the you know. It's pretty much just an improved version of Lady in a Leotard with a gun. While the colors might have a hideous movie maker posterized filter, it doesn't have any saucy two-dimensional variety, and that stupid ammo meter from Spectre Woods sadly returns. The pros far outweigh the cons. You can jump a lot higher, you can lock onto enemies, there's more than a single song, you have an actual health bar instead of it being represented with a tiny number, the doors you can enter after you kill all the enemies actually opens, there's an extra survival mode, and most importantly, the last level isn't an insult to everything fair and just. What have I done? Well, you vowed to kill the cat gang after reading that they killed a million puppies, and you killed them. Well, the paper is called the Daily Outrage. Oh, was that fake news? Did you kill dozens of people because you forgot to check if it was a reputable source? Oh, that is tragic! You see, that's what's wrong with the press. It radicalizes people. Lizard Lady, you might be low on the Voices Games Mega Babe tier list, but my heart goes out to you. Wait, this game came first? Why are all those things in Lady in a Leotard with a gun downgraded if it came after? I barely gave that game a star, but this gets a strong 1 star. Behold, the greatest The Voices Games game, or at least the best one in this video, there are more. I swear to God, this guy has a calendar of his OCs. This might look a lot like his third-person shooters I've talked about, but it's actually a puzzle game. The only thing your gun does is change the gravitational pull of the platforms and to get a certain amount of shots per level. You can also walk off the edge and do some sort of zero-gravity glide with momentum. You can even jump off the sides, letting it combine with the zero gravity, taking you to various heights depending on what frame of the jump you're at when you leave the platform. I don't think he kept all these in mind when designing the puzzles, because you can complete a lot of them without using all your shots. It's possible that was intentional, but I doubt it, as there's no achievements awarded for it, and this guy sure does love his excessive achievements. At the very least, he didn't account for the alternate momentum exploits. I didn't even know about them until I saw someone do it in a long play. Even he wasn't playing the game right. The later levels have a lot more steps to their puzzles, and failing them gets a lot more tedious. Whether it's slowly floating to a platform or even slowly walking to the edge of a platform, the trial and error process of figuring them out was so slow. The only reason why it's his best game is the atmosphere. That music is so soothing. This game doesn't make me think that space is cool or space is scary. The vibe is that space is flawless. We might not fully understand it, but that's okay. Everything is exactly as it should be. And I am at peace. But I am gonna turn it off because I'm very bored. Heaven Impact is a Temple Run clone, but unlike Temple Run's singular never-ending level, this game has an infinite amount of very short, insultingly easy levels. Kind of. It stops giving you achievements when you beat level 19, and the levels loop after only 9. So yes, the final achievement is awarded when you beat the first level for the 3rd time. So technically I didn't beat it because that's impossible, but I did buy all the outfits in the store, and that's the only thing you can actually strive to achieve. Weirdly enough, you don't earn an achievement for it though. Bible Adventures is an unlicensed Genesis game that was apparently only sold through Christian bookstores and telephone orders. It contains 3 original games based on 3 different books from the popular webcomic. Noah's Ark is the first one, and it is longer than the 2nd and 3rd combined. You have a checklist of animals you must find, grab, and bring to your house before it rains or something. But some animals don't let you grab them easily, so they have to be pounded into submission first. It's for your own good! There are also animals that try to kill you, and therefore the offspring of everything to have ever lived. For some reason, God still wants you to save these things, but not the red snakes. They are pure evil, and you can't even save them if you wanted to. Thankfully, God has placed stone tablets that contain Bible verses on the ground. Reading them replenishes health. The other games in the card have these too.
Quick, get that Bible quote before you run out of power.
There's only 4 levels in this, but they're all fairly long. And even though there is unlimited continues in all 3 games, starting a level over in this one is a lot of progress to lose. I mean, it is 25% of the game, but I pushed on. With courage, I endured. Beating the first made me think it was gonna take all day to beat the others. Baby Moses is the second game. Here you play as Jochebed, and you must carry your son to the end of each level while avoiding obstacles and enemies that foolishly think they can kill this indestructible baby. They can kill you, however, so shouldn't Moses be the one protecting you? Maybe use him as a shield, I don't know. Like Noah's Ark, there's only 4 levels, but this time each can easily be beaten in under a minute. The final game is David and Goliath, which is kind of a mixture between the first 2 games. Like Noah's Ark, you must find and bring all animals to a certain spot, but like Baby Moses, the levels have a traditional point A, point B setup, and they're dropped off at the end. They must have put this game last for a reason, as it's the only one with a climactic final level. There's no sheep. It's just a tough-as-nails vertical platformer where you can actually kill enemies, and it even ends with a real boss battle. This is definitely the hardest level in the entire Bible Adventures cartridge, but that's mostly because of how awful the controls are. Dang, that's pretty morbid for a 4 and up game. He bleeds out for a good 6 seconds before finally succumbing to his wounds. I've never seen cartoonish stars represent the intense migraine one experiences in their final moments before. Seeing them vanish as he goes stiff is eerie. Beanie is a $1 vertical platformer on the eShop, inspired by Donkey Kong Country and graphics only. There are 9 levels, where the only goal is to reach the beehive at the top so you can collect its honey for this bird character in the intro, which is a lot easier done than said. Not only are there no consequences for falling due to this safety net of bees tailing you at all times, but the spiky hazards don't even hurt you, they just push. Push you back down the level? No, because like I said, these helicopter parents won't let you. The only things that can kill you are these ghastly faces that only appear in one level. The final level? No, this game's structure is far too messy for that. When you've collected all the honey and returned to the bird's cabin, the game then turns into a 3D collectathon where you play as him. Huh? This is meant to be an advertisement for the developer's next game, Super Kiwi 64. You'd think that'd be an after credits bonus, but nope, that is the last level. So now that you beat the easiest game to ever exist, the game then tasks you to play all the levels again, but now with an added timer. It should have been this way to begin with. It's still pretty easy, but if the game had done this and removed the bee gatekeepers, then we would be golden. Golden for 2 stars. If you beat the levels fast enough, you're rewarded with medals. Get all the medals and you'll unlock a new character that can double jump. And why would you ever play as this character now that you've already done everything? The game doesn't give you a different medal for doing it again, and even if it did, it would be way easier. Nessie the Robot is another modern Evercade game made with retro hardware, this time with the NES. I'm certain that this was designed by a child, and if there's information out there that proves he's an adult, then it's lying. The levels are very short, yet still have multiple checkpoints. There's tutorials to explain the simplest of things throughout the whole game. You have unlimited lives. Most of the enemies can be easily avoided. There are collectibles that don't do anything. It doesn't even keep track of how many you got. There are Super Mario World style bonus rooms that are exclusively for collecting these useless things, and the biggest reason of all why the developer is at the very least autistic is the concerning amount of effort put into the characters and world building. Nothing is properly established and I don't follow any of it, but I can tell that this all made sense in his head. It reminds me a lot of an even younger me, long before I ever even heard of Scratch. Coming up with OCs, thinking of their dynamics with each other, my own little Quickville.
He did it. That robot dude actually did it.
Once you beat the lengthy but very easy final boss thanks to all the checkpoints, you unlock a harder mode. What makes it harder? Well, it removes the checkpoints. And scrolling. Why? I mean, I guess that makes it a lot harder, but playing it like that is painful. These levels weren't designed for different screens, so beating it this time is a game of memory and a whole lot of trial and error. Do I have to jump right before going to the next screen so I don't immediately fall to my death? Am I safe to walk normally, but then have to immediately stop pressing right when I'm on the next screen because there's a hole very close to the start? Only one way to find out. Weirdly enough, the final boss is absent from this mode. That was one of the only things I wanted to try without continuing. Thanks for nothing. Anime Girl's Son of a Beach is a third-person shooter where you play as a strong, independent beach babe who needs no man to save her from the sea monsters. This is like The Voices games meets $50 extra for the budget. There's 30 missions, but only 3 arenas that they swap through. They were hoping the mindlessness of the gameplay would prevent you from noticing. I mean, it worked on me. I thought there was only 2. The objective of every mission is the same. Shoot the monsters until there's none left. After completing a mission, you earn money you can spend on better weapons. You can equip 2, a crappy pistol with unlimited ammo, and a far better firearm that runs out. However, there are treasure chests in each arena that refill them. It took me way too long to realize that the treasure respawns over time. All the enemies are slow and dumb with barely any variation to their attacks, so essentially all you do the whole game is shoot at enemies while walking backwards and then choose between finishing the round with your crappy pistol or finding more ammo when you run out. It doesn't help that there's only 2 songs during gameplay. Autobond Tokyo is a 3DO racing game only released in Japan, but the 3DO is region free and all the text is in English, so why not? I am running out of ways to please Electronic Arts. This message is all I see. Every night. Like many titles on this console, it's more of a demo than an actual game. There's 2 modes to choose from, 3 tracks to race on, 4 cars to race with, and 8 frames to second with. The only difference between the 2 modes is Championship has other cars, while Time Attack does not. One of the cars is a fellow racer that you're up against, while the other cars are just law-abiding citizens that know nothing of your degenerate sport. If you lose a race, you get a screen that says loser, but if you win a race, you get a screen that says winner. There's also a ranking list for the best times, but they put no thought into it. They cram the high scores from both modes in the same leaderboard. So even if you beat the opponent in championship mode, which is supposed to be the whole point, you'll still get the loser screen if you don't beat the leaderboard's top winding? Let's say that somehow someone plays this game enough to have more scores than the leaderboard can keep track of, the most of which is 5. Your high scores for championship mode will be quickly invalidated by the ones for time attack because it's way easier. The scoreboard doesn't even remember what difficulty the AI was set to. What the heck? You can keep track of all that other stuff. Either go all the way or don't go at all. Rafa's World is a 2D platformer from the Switch eShop that costs $10 by itself, but if you want to save some money, you can buy it in a 3-game bundle for 75 cents. For all 3 games. It isn't a special sale or anything. This game takes the Alex Kidd approach, where instead of jumping on top of enemies and below blocks, you punch them both. There are normal blocks, item blocks, and money blocks. The money is spent in shops where you can buy health and more items. For some reason, certain items have a time limit once equipped, while the fireballs only leave you when you die. I'd say an unlimited amount of projectiles are a lot more useful than a limited amount of double jumps, and yet they both cost the same. And why wouldn't I want the fireballs automatically equipped? You have to manually select the items you want to use, whether they have a time limit or not. The game looks, sounds, and controls perfectly fine, but that's all it has. There's 3 worlds with 5 levels each. No variety, no bosses, and no ending. It just abruptly goes back to the stage select. There are places to explore and find things, but what's the point? To get power-ups that'll help you beat the game faster? Only after you went out of your way? That definitely wastes a lot more time than you'll save. Astro Rangers is a non-voices games third-person shooter on the PlayStation Store, but this time it was almost fun. For the first half an hour. All 15 missions are as simple as destroying the targets, whether there are a certain amount of enemies or a certain amount of things being guarded by enemies. They all take place in different parts of one very large area, and I've gotten lost in the maze of hallways quite a few times. There's a radar that tells you the general direction of some of the targets, but that doesn't really help. You can shoot, jump, throw grenades, and slow down time for intense precision. But not really, as this is done by holding down the square button, so aiming at the same time is a hassle. Which wouldn't be that much of a problem if it didn't also automatically move the crosshair down to a fixed vertical position every time. I've accepted that I can only aim in bullet time by sidestepping my character, but this forces you to use the other stick when shooting long range. Even if I didn't have to claw grip the controller, the camera is way too sensitive for that. But the game really starts to fall apart when you get the money from your targets. You can purchase the ability to start out with the better weapons, which you initially had to find. Then the game gets very easy when you buy the unlimited ammo and grenade upgrades. They are pretty expensive, but if you die in a mission, the money you got carries over, so if you manage to get stuck, you're automatically grinding, so you're not going to be stuck for much longer. You can even buy the ability to earn double the amount of money. By the second half of the game, I had enough to buy the most expensive upgrade, which is unlimited health. Now, that might stick it to those cheating enemies that can shoot you through walls, but 2 wrongs don't make a right. Loot Hero DX is a never-ending press left and right type game for the PlayStation Store. Just like Astro Rangers, killing enemies and spending their dropped money on upgrades is the name of the game. But this time, dying only gets you sent back a few meters to the most recent store for instant access. You can upgrade your attack, critical hit, defense, and speed. But only upgrading one is entirely necessary, because all you have to do when you come across an enemy that has more health than you is walk back the direction you came and kill the weaker enemies that respawn. Which is even easier than it sounds. There's no attack button, you just walk into them. Do this for 9 levels and you come across the final boss. Same deal as before, except he's significantly tougher than any of the bosses before him. Oh no, you have to walk left and right for a minute instead of 20 seconds of preparation this time. Once you bump into the legendary dragon a few times, you unlock 9 more levels that are the exact same as the ones you just beat, only harder. But at that point you're already upgraded, so is it really? There are in-game trophies that end with reaching level 90 and I got them. This is what the game looks like when you've upgraded as much as I did. Why do they let you upgrade your speed? I'm not proud of how long I played it. I have no idea how this managed to get me as hooked as it did. The presentation must have been the perfect trigger for the caveman side of my brain. I don't know. The gameplay is completely mindless. I'm not gonna pretend it's anything more than it is. I'm definitely gonna have to slow down on the 50-cent games this year. Everoon is yet another very easy, very short, very cheap platformer. But this one's gimmick is jumping back and forth between two dimensions. The normal one and this really hot alternate one that can only last 35 seconds in at a time before dying of heat stroke. You must collect all of these rotating square things, many of which can only be accessed by changing dimensions. The game's description says you solve puzzles, but only truly begins to play around with the idea in the very last level. I mean, that is 1/5 of the game, so sure, I guess. If you just so happen to die, you start over at the beginning of the level. But all the collectibles you got stays with you, so the very little challenge the game would have had is now cut in half. It had potential, the gimmick probably isn't original, but I thought it was neat. By the time I beat the last level, I was ready for the game to actually start. Well, at least there's one more level, I said. Oh, there's no obstacles, and it only serves as a way to set up the game's ending. Screw you, game description, that's not a level, there's 5! BC Racers, or BCE Racers for the woke libs, the same woke libs that butchered the cave bimbo, is the Chuck Rock universe's answer to Mario Kart. But besides both having a flying reptile that carries your car out of ditches, they really have nothing in common. First off, there's no item pickups. In its place, you have nitros that are received by completing laps, and a sidekick that has a useless low-reach attack to the driver's right, and only his right, which means you're very limited on where you can move if you wish to hit people. I've never killed anyone with it, and they've never killed me. You do have a health bar, but the only true threat are the obstacles. The very slippery physics will have you sliding off the road and into the countless rock-hard bushes, and that's not even including the tracks where you can fall off, so besides the occasional time an enemy crashes into you, there's really no point for them to be here. They could have just made this an arcade racer where you're only against the timer. And I'm mainly saying this because the game runs terribly, as you can very clearly see, and excluding sheer incompetence, the main thing slowing the game down are the enemy racers. It runs at 9 frames per second, and can dip to as low as 4. It's always 4 frames per second when there's a second player, which means that the multiplayer mode in Super Mario Kart is exactly 15 times faster. Also, I couldn't help but notice that the track textures are stretched in the same way that a lot of the Doom ports are, you know, to increase the frame rates. I wonder how badly it would run if it wasn't one of the ugliest games I ever played. Mechub Bolt is a puzzle platformer, and it's the first game on this list that isn't complete garbage. In this game, you have a gun, and while it is for shooting enemies, you don't kill them. You instead use them to create or destroy platforms by turning them on and off. There's 4 worlds, each with 24 very short levels. And like many of these games, it never gets hard, there's no bosses, and it's very anticlimactic. But I think its length has earned it this video's very first second star. Back again is a pseudo-intellectual, first-person artsy-fartsy platformer on the PlayStation Store, with limited colors, floating white dots, atmospheric music, and undetailed naked bodies everywhere. There's no enemies, the only thing that can kill you is falling, and the checkpoints become more sparse as the game progresses, as they should in a game like this. The only problem is that there's a faceless thirst-trap voice that talks to you throughout the whole game. It's technically here for exposition, but the dialogue is so pretentious and try-hard philosophical and British. I can tell that it's desperately trying to get female players to write erotica. Crypt of the Serpent King is a dungeon crawler on the PlayStation Store. In this game, you must find all the keys and use them to unlock that level's boss. I don't see any locks on any of the doors, but I assure you, they're so complex that they need many keys. The dungeons also have enemies that never stop following you, and treasure chests with all sorts of goodies. You can find food to replenish health, or gold that you can spend on upgraded stats or better weapons when you finish a level. And even some worse weapons. It's best not to avoid the enemies, because even though they're all in different parts of the map, they'll partner up, and fighting more than one at a time is very hard. The combat system is virtually turn-based in how you have to let them attack first, and then retaliate while they're finishing the animation. So having multiple enemies start at different times is hopeless for trying to time it without getting hit. You can't just spam the attack button either, because your character is very out of shape and gets tired fast. There's only 7 levels, but they're no gruel walk. Most of the keys are surrounded by obstacles that'll kill you if you fall into them. Level 2 is the only one that's a lot more forgiving in that aspect. For some reason, those keys are guarded by non-lethal flamethrowers connected to 4 support pillars. They cycle on and off, so you just have to wait a few seconds to enter and exit without losing health. And yet that's still probably the hardest level in the game because the enemies attack faster. It also has the only boss that you fight in a small arena, giving you very little room to dodge his attacks. Maybe making the traps less punishing was to balance it out? Still very odd. Croc, Legend of the Gobbos is an early 3D platformer that most people remember on the PlayStation, but I played the inferior Saturn version because it's the only 3D platformer on the console. Released in North America anyway. That is longer than 10 minutes. that actually uses 3D models. Does bug count? Back in my reviewing games that I barely even played days, I was pretty positive about it. And while I did play a majority of the levels, I didn't collect everything, which is required to get the final world. And playing Croc like a collectathon is almost dreadful. Not only do some of the levels have dead-end paths that makes Gobbos you might have missed impossible to get back to, but if you finish the level and come back to it later, the game also forces you to recollect everything you already got. The hub tells you how many Gobbos you found, so it does remember, and yet it still insists on making everything you did pointless. The game's okay, albeit still very flawed if you rush past everything and play it like a straightforward platformer, but playing it how the developers intended is... not. Plus, there's a game-breaking bug that can only be fixed by booting the game up manually from the menu, meaning you either have to open the disc tray while the game is on, or start the console with it empty and only put it in after it notices there's no disc. How was Sega Saturn Magazine okay with this? I think they might have been biased. Cube Decider is a puzzle game disguised as an action game. It's essentially a game of numbers with swords. You play as a cube man who must reach the exit of the 54 levels, and kill any other cube man that gets in his way. You're only equipped with 5 hit points and a level 1 sword, but despite you being heavily outnumbered, you still have your advantages. First off, they don't attack you unless you hit them first, and they only do it once, and won't attack again unless you hit them again. Self-defense can't get any more peaceful than that, so I'm starting to think that you're the bad guy.
Stop!
You can pick up extra health and attack upgrades, but they go back to normal once you reach an exit. That's all fine and good, but I don't think they put any thought into what order the levels are in. Some give you enough wiggle room to have plenty of health left over when you step on the portal, while you can only barely make it in others. A lot of these harder levels are earlier than the easy ones, but even if it had a proper difficulty curve, it would still be far too easy to have a satisfying climax. It doesn't help that every stage has the same textures and music. Cyber Speedway is a futuristic combat racer for the futuristic compact disc system, the Sega Saturn. Can't you tell by these menus? In this game, you can boost, side boost, pick up missiles, and shoot them at other racers to slow them down. They're even scattered across the time trial mode where there's no enemies to shoot them at. But the story mode is where you want to go so you can see its incredible cutscenes.
I'm gonna hustle down to the briefing room and warm up before the race. I'll see you down there.
Greetings.
This guy's your mechanic, and after you're taunted by the other planet's greatest racers, he recommends vehicle layouts before you race them. It's usually decent advice, and the game gives you enough continues to experiment with it if it doesn't end up working out. There are 6 tracks, but you can't play the final one or get the ending unless you select the advanced difficulty. Don't call the practice mode standard. I played the first 5 tracks twice because of this. I had to meet the galaxy's greatest racer, who looks exactly the same as the guy from round 4 because I didn't feel like drawing another character.
Allow me to introduce myself. I am Zahonic of Caledacia.
Despite your clever victory against my late servant Zahonic, you are now powerless against me.
Speaking of not feeling like it, the original Japanese release had the characters move their mouths. I'm guessing they removed it in the West because Americans talk slower and they were too lazy to make it sync with the audio. But they weren't too lazy to replace the original soundtrack with a crappy garage band that doesn't fit with a sci-fi setting at all. But its out-of-placedness does fit in with how funny the rest of the game is. The controls aren't very good. Turning is either very delayed or very twitchy depending on if you play it with a D-pad or analog stick. So along with experimenting with the steering and the settings, you can also change it significantly more during the race. The game came out before the analog controller existed, so the console is reading it as a racing wheel, as it does with every other racing game that supports it. I mostly played using the stick despite the game not being designed for it, so the recommended layout's not always working for me. Could have been because of that, but dang it, I paid a lot of money for that controller and I must take advantage of it when I can. Super Monkey Ball 3D was a launch title for the Nintendo S, and it was the biggest nothing burger in the whole franchise. While it's a tiny bit better than the previous game, Step and Roll, which you may remember from the very first episode of the series, that's only the case because you can play it with an analog stick. And yet I still think this would be the easiest, even if you had to use motion controls. Like all the previous sequels, you can continue at the exact level you died at despite having multiple lives, but this time I would have preferred it if you couldn't. You receive ribbons to show that you've completed worlds, but there's also secondary awards you can get for doing them without losing a single life. Yes, the game is so easy that they skipped beating it without using a continue. They figured that it wouldn't be worth having an award for, and they're right. There's 7 worlds with 10 levels each. Each world starts with an identical cutscene showing your character being sucked into a door, but the backgrounds are different. I wonder if a single person has watched it every time without skipping. I'm not sure why they bothered animating that. They didn't even attempt to add any kind of story. When you beat the 7th world, it goes straight to the credits. But then you unlock a super secret 8th world. This is where the game rewards the player player for putting up with all the content that's been neutered for normies by finally giving him the challenge that he's been waiting for. Nah, it's not any harder. I have no idea why they didn't just make this the last world. It would have given it an even number, which is way cooler than tacking on a bonus world that has the same difficulty. Block Droppin' is an unofficial Game Boy Color game released in the modern day, and it's the very first game I beat on my glorious Evercade. It's a puzzle game where you must move a tile one space to match it with at least 2 others. There's 20 levels, and each has an assigned amount that needs to be matched for each color in a limited amount of moves, which is never difficult because every now and then a special tile will appear that, if matched, will clear the entire column and every color caught in the crossfire will be counted. It seems like every other move I do is an unintentional combo. The level layouts are randomly generated, so they never get any harder, just longer. The only notable thing that changes is how many matches you have to make, which isn't a problem at all, as it also gives you just as many extra moves. You always have 3 more than how many of each color you have to match. If they wanted it to get harder, then why increase the number of moves? At least don't do it as frequently. They both always go up the same amount, and the levels aren't pre-designed, so why stop at 20? Why not 100? Or unlimited? I only ask because this is another game that I'm ashamed to say got me hooked. At least this one ends, so I had an excuse to stop playing, but I didn't have to so soon. Arzette and the Jewel of Faramore attempts to be a love letter to the CDI Zelda games that were made infamous by the internet of old. The game is a Metroidvania, or more specifically, a Lelda the Faces of Gamelon, or is it a Zinc the Wand of Evil? Like a lot of other games I tend to beat, the hardest part is at the beginning before you get enough upgrades and abilities to make yourself an unstoppable god. By the latter half of the game, you'll be able to beat entire bosses just by holding down the shield button and automatically deflecting their attacks back at them. This has gotta be the steepest reverse difficulty curve I've ever had the honor to behold. Usually the games where you can grind money only gets easy because you can stock up on potions, but here I never even had to buy a single one. And just like every game that's stupid easy, it gives you a harder difficulty only after you beat the whole game. I'm sure people would love to play the entire thing again. I mean, it's not like you have to revisit the same levels again and again in a single playthrough as it is. Starting over from scratch without any of the abilities you collected? Sure, why not? Yeah, I played it again. Yes, it was technically harder, or more specifically, the first couple of levels were harder. Same problem as before. You unlock another harder difficulty after that. Yes, I beat that too, and yes, you're still invincible. Toki Going Apespit is a run-and-gun platformer on the Sega Genesis. Okay, walking gun. You may think that the very slow speed Toki moves would make the game easy, as you'd see enemies coming from 2 miles away, but they're not the only things that can kill you. There's also projectiles, blind jumps, and non-sentient hazards that want nothing more than for you to be a dead ape. There are power-ups and weapon upgrades, the weapon being your monkey lips, that might just give you the upper hand, but be careful, hotshot. This game has one-hit deaths and no checkpoints. Unless you view the stage's 4-act structure as checkpoints, but no, the screen fades out and back in. These are levels. So you'll have to slowly walk back to where you died every time, and you never want to learn from your mistakes and be careful because you already move so freaking slow! There are some gimmick levels that move a bit quicker, like this swimming level, this slippery level, and this vehicle level, but that's it. You can give yourself an absurd amount of lives and continues in the settings, so I was eventually able to beat it, but the only thing that kept me playing was the music. Battle Cars is another futuristic combat racer, this time for the Super Nintendo. Despite being on a puny last-gen cartridge system, this one has 9 courses to race on, each with 2 tracks. The first one is always a single lap and is on a time limit, while the second has 3 laps and you're up against that course's champion. The first ones are labeled cross-country. They're used as a way to earn 2 types of currency that you can spend on upgrades in preparation for the second track. You earn cash by destroying enemy vehicles, and you earn credits by having extra time left when you finish. I didn't know the separate ways of earning each until long after I finished the game, so I focused on killing enemies. If you run out of time completely, then these indestructible UFO-looking things attack you until you finish or die. But if you want as much cash as possible, you can strategize destroying enough vehicles to satisfy your sick greed, while also having just enough time to barely escape the UFOs with a smidge of health. There's unlimited continues, so if you're not satisfied with how much you made, you can always try again. You can even go back if you lose at track 2. You have a choice of starting over the race or returning to cross-country. I'm not sure if this is intentional, but if you do start over the current course, the money you made last time carries over, so you can go back and grind for as long as it takes. That's how I was able to beat it, and I beat it in all 3 difficulties. Easy mode practically leaves out the second half of the game, but I didn't feel as cheated. I mean, at least they didn't call it standard, but for some reason, hard mode removes the first 2 courses, making normal the only choice if you want the full game. I didn't initially notice that either. Man, this year I really need to start writing these right after I beat the games. All this research is destroying the point of my series. I might as well read someone else's. Tori 3D is a platformer on the eShop inspired by a Japanese Saturn game called Ninpen Menmeru, and it's part of the same universe as Beanie. And just like Beanie, it's 20 minutes and structurally inept. There's 9 levels and 4 remix levels that have completely different layouts, so I'm not sure why they're not viewed as real levels. You can play the first 8 in any order you want, but you must beat them all to unlock the 9th, which is very easy thanks to all the checkpoints and limited lives and lack of any kind of boss fights. There's this character that cackles at you in the beginning of the first level, and he shows up more throughout the game. In the middle, he even approaches you, and his mere presence turns the music off, and he makes this spooky sound as he slowly levitates towards you. Dang, things must be getting serious. You'd expect the game to do something with all the tension it's been building, but the last level plays like all the other ones. Once you land on the finish platform, it thanks you for playing and gives you the credits. You can unlock other characters by getting all the collectibles and by earning at least an A rank in all the levels, but by the time you do that, there's nothing else to do. You can still go for an S rank, but it doesn't rate your performance when you play as the new characters. Most likely because they have better stats, and that would be cheating, but why not give them their own time quotas? Tori 2 is a tiny bit better, and these two games are the borderline between 2 and 3 stars. This one starts with an intro giving you context to the first game's story. Turns out the supernatural entity that stalked you throughout the first game stole your ice cream, and that's the reason for the ongoing adventure. Just like Tori 3D, it has 8 levels that when beat unlocks a 9th, but this time it has a final boss! It's very easy, and he's not in the slightest bit ominous anymore, but hey, it feels more like a real video game, and that's something. The story concludes showing you proudly holding your ice cream, only to be a little sissy and give it back to him after you see him cry like the sore loser he is. This came out only months after the first one, and they both only cost $1, so I must ask, why couldn't you just release a single 40-minute game? I'd be willing to pay a whopping $2 for that. Plus, if it was that way, it wouldn't be as tedious to go for a good rank in the first game's levels, because another improvement they made is the timer. If you die, it goes back to what it was before you stepped over the last checkpoint. It sounds cheap, but I'd rather do that than reset the whole level every time I make a mistake. So good on Tori 2 for making 100% less hard for special boys like me. This is probably the best game that costs a single $1. And I am aware that you can buy real, albeit poopy games in used game stores for that price. I didn't stutter. Crazy Chicken Jump and Run Traps and Treasures is a modern re-release of the 2006 PC platformer Crazy Chicken, The Good, the Egg, and the Ugly, and I'm not sure which one has a worse name. This franchise started as a rail shooter where you kill crazy chickens, but here you play as a crazy chicken, who is apparently the most popular video game character in all of Germany at one point. This crazy chicken can jump, punch, or shoot enemies if you have the ammo. If the chickens from the original game had this ability, you would be screwed. It's about as simple as they come, but that's not necessarily a bad thing. What it does do, it does well. There's 21 levels with 6 bonus levels you can unlock by collecting all 60 artifacts, but they're not worth it. They're not like the bonus levels in Super Lucky's Tale where they're actually the best levels in the game, but more like the Wrath of Cortex where they're just reused assets plopped together to not waste any abandoned code. Just play the game normally, it's a lot more fun when you're not looking for things anyway. That only leaves you with about an hour of gameplay, however, so I can't quite recommend it with its current price tag unless you're fascinated in games this obscure. But I wasn't expecting it to be this competent, albeit generic. The original game had a sequel that has the exact same graphics and engine. It even has the same amount of worlds and lack of boss fights. They really couldn't have combined both games' levels to make it an ultra mega 6-world adventure. That still wouldn't be as much as the platforming norm, but it'd be nice, and I'm sure it would have been very easy. You guys are either pretending that this is a different game or that the original never existed with that name change, so you owe it to us. Make the second game's levels harder to blend it in better and call it Crazy Chicken 3 and Knuckles. Oh, it introduced bonus rooms? I guess that would be kind of weird to introduce halfway through the game. Remove those. Okay, I guess it wouldn't be that easy to combine them. Heart of Tibet did eventually get a modern re-release as well, but not on a physical disc, no thank you. Jane Austen's 8-Bit Adventure is a platformer where an author I've never heard of because I don't read gets sucked into an 8-bit world and must collect all of her stolen books to get out. I'm sure the 2 people that dabbles in classic literature while also owning an Evercade would appreciate this. There are 4 difficulties: casual, normal, hard, and dire. The only difference is how much health you get. I chose hard because it gives you 4, and I definitely wasn't going to play with dire's one-hit deaths. But now that I look back, I probably still could have done it with a bit of patience. Every door you enter, every subsequent screen you go to, they all function as checkpoints checkpoints, and you also have unlimited lives. Man, why are all the games I just so happen to beat always so easy? There are 6 levels where you must find all the missing pages before you can open that boss's door. Once you beat that level's boss, you earn a new ability. They're pretty useful at first, but by the second half they must have run out of ideas because they become pretty lame. Still, I enjoyed it up until book 7. After beating level 6, you were then tasked to go back to every level again and collect 6 pearls of wisdom that are contained within doors that were previously unopenable. But for some reason, you can still enter the boss's doors and fight them again despite them already giving you the books back. No, you can't leave the way you came. No, you can't fast travel to the hub. And yes, there's a checkpoint, so you can't just let them kill you. You have to beat them again before you have another chance to find the correct door. Now, this is 100% my fault. I was very out of it by this point, but I ended up fighting the same boss 4 times in a row. My record. I can't even imagine how frustrating it would be if I played with one-hit deaths. Punky Skunk is a 2D platformer for the original PlayStation. It was originally being developed for the Super Nintendo, but by the time it was almost finished, they decided to rework it to a console where it would have no audience. You play as a skunk, who really isn't all that punky when you think about it. This skunk can jump, fart, and collect items, but they aren't like your typical blow-and-go items. Almost every level is made with a specific one in mind and can't be beaten without it. But sometimes it can be temporarily easier to progress without it, so you can swap between your power-up and your fart at any time. You can lose it by dying, but it always appears right where you respawn, so you might as well not lose it at all. This makes practically every level a gimmick level, and as far as I can tell, the power-ups are evenly distributed throughout the game, albeit I don't feel like counting. My favorites are the paraglider levels. Like Breath of the Wild, this glider can break the law of gravity with the aid of unfathomably strong yet focused air currents, which can lead to some pretty creative obstacles. This game's okay. Alex Kidd in the Enchanted Castle is the only game with Sega's OG mascot to have the same amount of binary digits as their next and far more known gerbil character. What made this game unique from the other platformers at the time was the in-game currency you get from smashing treasure chests and killing enemies. With money, you can get power-ups from the various buildings you'll find in certain levels, but instead of buying them, you'll need to win at a game of rock, paper, scissors. That might sound unfathomably stupid and random, but let me explain. This game takes place on the planet Paper Rock, and playing rock, paper, scissors is a huge part of their culture. See, it all makes sense now, right? You shouldn't have judged. After your opponent tells you the amount of money you must bet on the game, he then asks you if you're willing to bet your life. This makes it sound like you're not only betting money, so I'll throw out my childhood I never bothered, because risking your life over a game of chance didn't sound quite worth it at the time. I guess it must have been a translation issue, because it turns out losing doesn't actually kill you. You just lose the money you spend. How could they screw it up that badly? Anyway, the power-ups can give you projectile attacks, levitation, and even temporary invincibility, but the most important power-up is the amulet, which lets you read an opponent's mind when playing rock, paper, scissors. This is also the only item that can be found elsewhere. You need them because there are rock, paper, scissors boss battles at the end of certain stages, and losing them will kill you. And yet they're not the ones that warn you! You still have to think moderately fast due to them constantly changing their mind on what gesture they're gonna use, but thanks to the amulet, they're no longer the worst boss battles in the history of video games. Now, you could keep entering the same building and grind until you have enough power-ups to make the game very easy, but the price of admission gets more and more expensive every time you win, and it only resets in later levels. You will also need 1,000 coins if you wish to continue after losing all your lives, so you'll need to balance how much money you spend and save, which is pretty well thought out. In concept, anyway. All the treasure chests respawn when you die, so getting 1,000 coins is very easy. Even on hard mode, where you only start with 1 life, it's still easy. But it's the closest the game gets to having a balanced currency system, so I guess I'd recommend playing on that. Especially since there's an unexplainable glitch on easier difficulties that sends you back to level 9 if you die in level 10. Every level except that one doesn't make you replay an earlier level just to try again. I originally thought this was intentional since it's the only level where you can fall to your death, and it's right after the only level with vertical platforming, but I guess not because this doesn't happen in hard mode. How is that even possible? From a programming standpoint, how? Fairy Fire was a $1 mobile game released in 2015, but it only cost 10 consecutive presses of the menu button for the Evercade version. There's currently 12 hidden games built into the console's firmware, and that's the code to unlock it. It's a Defender clone where you play as a tiny wizard that must bring the 10 fairies to the exit before they're captured by these evil eyeballs. Either that or bring the ones that survived. Despite being a wizard, you're kind of weak and lame. You don't have a broomstick, so you move around using a firework as some kind of a jetpack. You also die in only one hit, and if a fairy follows you while that happens, he dies too. Your wizardly cape must be so flammable that the death explosions burn them. The levels end when the enemies are dead and the fairies are gone. You need at least one to be alive when gone, however, because when they're all dead, it's game over. There's 3 of what the game calls floors, each with 10 levels. In between levels, you can spend the jewels you collected on upgrades, extra lives, or bringing back fallen fairies. When you complete a floor, you can restart the game at that point, but it'll start you off with a lot less upgrades than you would have had if you just started the game over, so it's not quite a checkpoint. I tried starting the game at floor 2 and 3 once I earned the ability, but I was only able to make it to the end by starting from scratch. The fun part is figuring out the optimal upgrades yourself anyway. You can improve your character's fire rate, you can give the fairy you pick up his own fairy fire, you can increase the number of fairies that can be picked up at a time, and you can even increase the number of fairies that have the fairy fire. The most you can carry when upgraded is 5, so if you also buy the fairy fire 5 times, you feel like a god. It also somehow prevents them from dying with you. Fairy fire is a great explosion fire retardant. The presentation is minimal, but it was originally a mobile game. I enjoyed it. Spending $100 on an Evercade is so worth it that you don't even need to buy an additional cart to have a decent time. Biolab Wars is a Contra clone on the PlayStation Store. Usually these indie NES tribute games either takes the classic approach and makes the difficulty very high to compensate for its short runtime, or they increase the length far past what was possible in that era. But this one does neither. There's only 7 levels, which is even less than the original Contra, and it's not all that hard. There's unlimited continues, plenty of checkpoints, health pickups, extra lives, and the bosses are very underwhelming. But if one gives you a hard enough time where you'll have less than 3 lives when you start the next level, just quit and reselect this stage. You'll have 3 lives again. I admit that it is pretty refreshing to play a game like this where I can actually win, but they could have made it just a little harder. If you want a real challenge, then you could try to earn the beating the game without dying achievement, but I wouldn't trust it. You also supposedly earn achievements for beating every stage with each character. I beat them all with 2 and I never got them. Roguecraft DX is a modern dungeon crawler made on the hardware of Amiga computers. And it's one of only 2 Evercade games that are standalone releases. See guys, the Evercade is a real game console. Just look at these games laying side by side with the big boys. It's labeled as a roguelike game that strives to simplify it as much as possible for newcomers to the genre. I've never played one and I was still able to enjoy it, so I'd say they were successful. There are 15 levels that are as simple as finding the key and then finding the exit. They're presented as an isometric grid, but movement still feels smooth until you come across an enemy. That's because you then have to take turns moving in battles. Battling isn't a matter of winning, but rather maximizing your chances of surviving. Everything is random, the stages, items, the enemies, and whether or not anyone's attack will hit. It was hard, but I was finally able to beat the game when I stopped being so stubborn and accepted that I should avoid as much danger as possible. Even then, I was only able to finish on easy mode. It's outrageous how quickly you die on medium. You have to restart the entire game no matter what mode you're on, which isn't too bad thanks to the randomized levels. Still, I'm satisfied with beating it on easy. Life on Mars is a modern Metroidvania made with Genesis hardware, and this one isn't stretching that term in the slightest as it's all one giant level. And it has that spooky sci-fi atmosphere, so I guess this is more specifically a super fusion dread mission Samus Returns. Just like Arzette, slain enemies drop currency, but this time around you can only spend it on increasing your stats, and thanks to the upgrades being very small and the process very slow, the difficulty is better balanced. I did have some trouble at a couple parts, but I never felt like grinding, and by the end of the game I was not fully upgraded. I don't think that's ever happened before. I'll probably try it on a higher difficulty someday. Or I could just play a real Metroid game, but I hear those are really hard. Archangus Revolution is a free-roaming vertical shooter made with Genesis hardware. I call it that because your ship always points to the top of the screen, but along with being able to strafe all over the place, you can also rotate the entire arena with Super Nintendo-style scaling. This would be quite the limit pusher if it was released back in the day. The effects, along with all the characters being fully voiced, makes me think that this has to be at least 17 billion mega power. It would be cool seeing this play on a real Genesis, but I'm not paying $60 for a cartridge that looks like it's from AliExpress. There's 5 missions, each with 3 levels, with the exception of Mission 1, which has 2. Every 3rd level after it is always a boss battle, but Mission 1 combines them for some reason. Throughout the missions, you earn new weapons that you can swap through with the top 3 buttons on your Genesis 6-button arcade pad. There's the standard forward-shooting pea shooters you start with that can be upgraded to have slightly thicker bullets. Then you earn the homing cannon that is very overpowered. The bullets do at least as much damage, and they're heat-seeking. The tutorial makes it look like there's gonna be obstacles that messes with your bullets, but it never happens again after that. And then finally, there's the blast cannon that shoots very large bullets that can go through multiple targets. You do need it to break through locked doors, but it's not very useful for battle. You lose all your weapons when you die, which makes sense. You have unlimited lives and a lot of checkpoints, so you should receive some kind of penalty. But they're also gone when you move from one level to the next. Canonically, how does that happen? But the weirdest part of the game is that speed slider that stares you in the face the whole time. You can make everything 25% to 4 times slower, even the frame rate. I assume it's there in case your reflexes aren't good enough to dodge all the bullets, and dang it, its tempting gaze got the best of me. I was able to do everything on the default difficulty without cheating except for the final boss. I would have been fine with accepting defeat and moving on to another game. What is wrong with you people? Don't have that on the HUD, make it a cheat code. The game is short enough where I was willing to beat it multiple times to experiment. I had to use it a lot more, but I can beat it on the hardest difficulty if I slow it down at the harder parts. I was able to beat the final boss without it in difficulty 2, which is 1 below the default, but the fight is significantly harder than anything else in the game no matter what difficulty you choose, so everything before it was very easy. Banjo-Tooie is a mixed bag. On one hand, it's reminiscent of one of the best games ever made, and on the other, that's by far the best thing it has going for it. There were a couple times in the original where I went, how is anyone supposed to figure that out? But here it felt like almost half the game. It's the Doom 2 of Banjo-Kazooie's Doom if Doom 2 ran like garbage and punished you a lot less for dying. The first game had something called a note score. It was a way to not only make you take finding all the notes a lot more seriously, but also your ability to die. Notes were very important to progressing the game, and if you died in the middle of the level, all the notes respawned, and you had to recollect as many as you did last time, and then the rest if you wanted more. Having it that way had its downsides, but removing it in Tooie and letting you keep everything made it a lot less engaging. If I die, oh well, I have to respawn somewhere else, and I already have no idea what to do, so this changes nothing. I'm sure I'll like it more if I play it again, since I now know what to do, but couldn't you say that for every confusing game? Just like the first one, you don't need to get every puzzle piece to beat it, and they even decreased the amount from Kazooie's 94% to 77%. I still think they should have made it lower. Die Hard Arcade is a 3D beat-em-up that might sound like a movie tie-in, but it actually has no relation to Die Hard. In its original Japanese release, it was actually called Doki Doki Panic, and to get the game as originally intended, you must insert Sonic 3 on the top. And did you know there's even a DK rap? This game was one of the biggest reasons I wanted a Saturn as a kid. It took many years, but I finally bought it at the ripe age of 17, and it's still the most money I've ever spent on a video game. It was only gonna get more and more expensive, so I might as well have bought it while I still could. But finally getting to play it was kinda disappointing. It's definitely fun. There's a great variety in combos, weapons, and they introduce QuickTime events to the non-FMV world, and they're even done in a creative, not obnoxious way. But the controls are not as fluid as they look, and the limitations of being on a CD kind of ruins the flow of the entire game. It's fine that the game has to load when you start a level, but there's also a loading time for the cutscenes, and there's subsequent loading times in between every shot of the cutscenes. I didn't know these had to load at all in the arcade version. They at the very least could have kept the music playing while it's slowly piecing the scene together. Look at how much they butchered these!
Taking you so long to get rid of those SWAT guys! It's open! It's open! Yes!
In the settings, you can turn them off entirely, but that also gets rid of the scene showing your character move to the next room, which adds a certain emptiness to it that makes me feel sad. I mean, how did this enemy get stuck in the dumpster? You don't know, he's just there. There's no perfect way to play this version, which sucks. Sword of the Berserk Guts Rage is a hack-and-slash beat-em-up that's very ahead of its time. Just like modern games, it prioritizes being cinematic over being fun. There's QuickTime events, the opening credits don't appear until after the first battle, there's over an hour of cutscenes in a 2-hour game, and the game even has seemingly no load times as it does so during the cutscenes, all while using in-game graphics, mind you, very modern. The game is split into 4 stages. Stage 1 has 5 levels, and the rest have 3. Completing a level gets your items and ammo ammo refilled, which really isn't special at all because they also get refilled whenever you die. Even on the hardest difficulty, this game is kinda easy. And just in case you wanted it to be harder, the game raises the amount of continues the higher the difficulty is set. So on hard mode, you essentially have 13 lives, and every time you die, you get brought back to a level checkpoint with refilled items, even if you entered with no items. And all that happens when you lose all your continues is you have to start the stage over, but realistically that won't happen until stage 4, and you wanna know why? Because you don't even have to fight the enemies a lot of the time, you can just run past them. Which is a shame, because the combat, even if it is kinda clunky, has some depth. Walls deflect your character's sword when doing basic attacks, so you need to resort to other moves when in tight spaces, but this does not apply when your rage meter is full, as your character is so angry that walls don't even slow them down. Not the most innovative, but it's not bad. The game's atmosphere is definitely the best part. It has a great soundtrack that perfectly suits the hyper-violence of the gameplay and the freakiness of its world when the, although annoyingly cynical, but interesting story is told. Naughty Bear Gold Edition is a hyper-violent stealth game where you play as a teddy bear that's been wronged one too many times by his bully neighbors. It's also the only way to get the DLC chapters ever since the online stores for 360 and PS3 went bye-bye forever. What makes this game different from the other stealth games is how insanely brain-dead the AI is, but it's supposed to be. They're just a bunch of stupid bears, so you have the freedom to kill them however you please. But the twist is its arcadey score system that forces you to kill them creatively, but also not waste any time. You get points by not just killing, but breaking things, setting traps, and psychologically torturing the other bears. There's a meter on the top of the screen that goes up a certain amount depending on what naughty misdeed you commit. The higher it is, the more points you'll get for future naughtiness. But not too far into the future because it is slowly but constantly decreasing. But there are also collectible snowflake thingies that can temporarily freeze the meter, and you'll need to memorize where they are if you wish to achieve greatness. Which shouldn't be too hard after a couple hours because this game is super repetitive. All 10 chapters are on the same island, and the only thing that essentially changes are the enemy types and weapons. Every chapter also has 4 alternate challenge missions that can be unlocked with a certain amount of trophies. You get these trophies by having enough points at the end of a mission. Later chapters will require a little bit of extra trophies, so you will have to play some of these challenge missions. But the main game can still easily be beaten in under 2 hours, so if you're willing to fundamentally play the same level 20 times, you might as well go all the way and do the other 30, because despite its really rough controls, it's very fun. Kirby's Adventure was a very late game for the NES, and it shows just how much game design has changed within those 10 years, because I can actually beat an NES game. Being easy has been a staple in the Kirby franchise for a very long time, but I didn't realize that it's been like that since the very beginning. It follows the world level structure popularized by the Mario series, but it doesn't send you back to the beginning of the world if you lose all your lives. The only difference between losing them all and only losing one is you potentially lose multiple minutes of progress instead of 30 seconds, because the already short levels have several checkpoints. Beating the game unlocked a harder mode, so I might try that, but if it's too much harder, then the sluggish controls might actually be frustrating. I'm impossible to please. But it was neat playing an OEM NES game with hours of content, gameplay variety, tutorials, save files, and graphics that are almost on par with a fake NES game. Sonic Superstars is Sega's attempt to mimic the success of their beloved game that wasn't even made by them. Hey guys, look! It's Knack the Weasel! Remember him? He was from a Game Gear game! This one's for the fans. We take a lot of risks for you. I don't think anyone complained that Sonic Mania was too hard, but they still felt the need to make this one easier. That one, which everyone loved, gave you limited lives that if lost made you start the zone over, so of course they had to remove that. The biggest consequence you get here is going back to a checkpoint, and yes, bosses still count as checkpoints. The soundtrack is reminiscent of the oh-so-revolutionary Sonic 4 with its chiptune over substance strategy. I can see why they were inspired by that one. It was made by Sega themselves after all. But despite showing yet again that the fans make better games than they do, I still liked it. It plays enough like classic Sonic games, and that's good enough for me. I'm a sucker. Ratchet and Clank is a 3D platformer that started yet another big Sony franchise that I'm only now slowly catching up with. It doubles as a shooter, with a plethora of weapons you get as you progress. There's so many that you eventually run out of room on the weapon wheel, specifically made to make swapping them quicker. So you have to use a secondary weapon selection screen and swap the ones you no longer want on the wheel. It definitely focuses on quantity over quality, and I almost never used a lot of them. Still, it has that early 2000s Sony mascot tood that I might have not grown up with, but I'm rather charmed by. It also has an impressive amount of content for a series' first game. I think this was a little better than the first Jak and Daxter and Sly Cooper, my favorite of the PS2 ugly character game trio. I'm sure those quadrilogies all get better, but I'll probably continue this first as I have a lot more of them rotting away unplayed. Shantae and the Pirate's Curse is the third game in the long-running series, and it's widely considered to be the best one. I'm not really sure why, as it suffers from the same problem that all the other ones have. At least this one's hard enough where I actually feel a need to stock up on potions unlike Arzette, but I can still just stock up on potions. Make them more expensive! I'm not motivated by the principle! It's definitely better than the ones that preceded it, but maybe I expected too much. Or maybe everyone that's not me is too harsh at the next two. Wario World was one of my favorite games growing up, and now that I've finally completed it, I can see why. Because it's really freaking easy. But easy in a way that would convince a stupid child into thinking it's challenging. What's frustrating is that the difficulty being this low could have easily been avoided. The entire game you collect money. You can punch it out of enemies, punch it out of chests, or you can just find it lying around on the ground. And whenever you die, you have to spend money to continue. But it's always such a small amount that you can collect it all back and then some almost instantly. You can also pay to replenish health, so what gives, game? Pick one, preferably the one that helps you less. Especially since if for whatever reason you quit on a level's boss, you can go right back to it via this balloon thing. If that's not evidence that this game was originally harder, then I guess it wasn't. Treasure isn't known for making easy games, so maybe there was a little pressure by Nintendo, I don't know. By the time I was at the final boss, I had so much money that it was worth getting burnt by its walls of flame just so I could get to the crystals faster. Which sucks, because this game was almost a masterpiece. Every level is sprawling with creativity that I never see anymore, and everything about its atmosphere is really charming. It's still very fun, even if you are being babied the whole time. I'm not biased by my childhood, I swear. Mario Kart Wii is the greatest installment in the series, and it is not to be disputed. While the later games tried to tone down the insanity and charm, deliberately, this one had the soul of the earlier games while also not controlling poorly. It has double the amount of tracks as 64 and Double Dash, and it introduced bikes to the vehicle selection. The wheelie mechanic alone makes this game special. Just like real bikes, their speed is increased when being balanced on one wheel, and it adds tons of strategy. They could have made the upsides to choosing one of the carts a little better to balance it out, but whatever. People who can't master the wheelie don't deserve an advantage. You can barely turn left and right when it's happening, but you can transition between it in a drift, which also has its own speed boost if you do it for long enough. So along with figuring out the best times to drift, you could also throw wheelies into the mix. The only downside are the different kinds of drift that certain vehicles have. The stats show almost everything there is to know, except it doesn't say whether they have inward or outward drift. I never got used to outward drift, and if the bike I chose had it, I'd just go back to the title screen and hope the next one didn't. Still, this is one of Nintendo's best. I used to love it for its multiplayer, but now I know it's even great when playing alone. And finally, Good Boy Galaxy is a modern platformer made with Game Boy Advance hardware. It's incredible that they crammed a game this grand in scope on a tiny 32 megabit cart. It has levels in the traditional sense while having things you can only access with later abilities, but there's plenty more to make it unique. There's electric gates that take away one of your three main gadgets: your jetpack, which lets you double jump, your Halo-esque shield, or your gun. Each of the gates are at different parts of the level most of the time and are required to reach certain places, so you have to figure out what you can do when missing a certain part of your suit. But sometimes you can open up passages for different gates. That, along with all the abilities you collect on the way, makes it sound very hard to make levels while considering all of it, but they did a fantastic job and I was never able to find any exploits. I'm amazed at how big this game is. There's so many new gimmicks and set pieces introduced in such a rapid and impressive rate just in case you somehow get bored. Good Boy Galaxy is the gift that keeps on giving. The graphics are some of the best on the console, the music is the best on the console. It should feel offended that Evercade lumped it together with some other game instead of making it a standalone release. That's coming to the Nintendo Switch. For the love of God, play it!